Gordon G. Chang is the author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America. His previous books include China is Going to War, Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon has lived and worked in China and Hong Kong for almost 2 decades, most recently in Shanghai. He's a prolific writer. He's served as trustee of Cornell University, and he's a regular guest on top media outlets. He's also a friend and regular guest in the Economic War Room. You can follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Welcome, Gordon, back to the Economic War Room.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
I love your X feed. It's phenomenal. And I'd like to actually bring up a couple of recent posts that you've made and get your thoughts so you could dive a little deeper on them. And I want to start with this one. This was July 8th. It says, "Do not let China's regime anywhere near our food supply." Now, I know in part that's got to be, this report, Chinese nationals accused of smuggling dangerous biological pathogen into the United States that could threaten our food supply. But it may go deeper than that. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, in June, 3 Chinese nationals were charged with smuggling in biological agents into the U.S. The first 2 were bringing in a fungus that causes head blight. Now, this is something which is common around the world and in the United States, and people may say, well, why would Chinese researchers risk their careers by bringing something in that was already here? And I think the answer is because it wasn't already here. I think what was happening was that the Chinese were bringing in genetically modified blight, and that would make it more dangerous to our agriculture. But we know that for at least a half decade, China has been trying to plant invasive species into our countries. We know that because in 2020, Americans in all 50 states received unsolicited seeds from China. And that's continued into this year, where Temu, the Chinese Amazon-type site, was actually caught in Texas, where you are, was caught sending in seeds and an unidentified liquid unsolicited to parties in Texas. So we got to be really concerned that China is attacking our agriculture and our livestock.
Well, those are the things we've caught. What about the things that they've done that we haven't caught? And what about all this purchase of farmland and so forth? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, we know that the Chinese are using our farm and ranch land for purposes which are malign. So, for instance, they're basing human trafficking operations in the state next to you, which is Oklahoma. There's illegal marijuana grows in Oklahoma, especially also in Maine. And of course, there have been all of these reports of Chinese parties suspiciously buying land near sensitive military sites. So we know that they're up to no good. No American may own a square inch of China. So why are we allowing the Chinese to own square miles of our land?
Yeah, that's a fair question. In fact, that was a question that you posed actually just the other day with exactly no American may own a square inch in China, so why do we allow Chinese nationals to own square miles here? That's, again, from your X feed. If you're not following Gordon Chang's X feed, you must follow it because he raises provocative questions and then he gives detailed facts and information that shows what a threat China really actually is. Now, Texas signed a ban on this. Governor Abbott, what are your thoughts on what he did?
Well, that's great, but we have got 49 other states. Now, some states like Florida have provisions as well, but we need to have a comprehensive ban. We saw on Tuesday the Department of Agriculture announced an initiative in this regard. We got to see how far that actually goes. But this is an emergency because we know what the Chinese have been doing on our land, and this is something that is going to threaten our heartland. Yeah, no,
again, here's your tweet. Take back all farm and ranch land from China's nationals, every blade of grass. And you put a link to the press conference that was held on how we're not going to allow China to literally take over our farmland. This is national security, it's food security, it's personal security, and yet if you want to catch these things, one way to do it, I think for most young people, their latest source of news is the X feed, and you're producing and putting a lot. I know a lot of people didn't even see that press conference unless they were following your X feed.
Well, thank you.
So why is this all so nefarious? I pulled up my book, According to Plan, and it's got quotes in there from a secret speech, General Chi Haoshan. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Close enough.
Yeah.
Sure, how 10.
This secret speech talks about how China's ruined their domestic ecology, and that at some point they feel that they must colonize America, and it's almost their right. Can you comment on that speech? Is that legitimate? I mean, I got it from Epoch Times, and I got it from my friend Jeff Nyquist. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this was a speech when the general was China's defense minister, and it's from the first few years of this century. It has been reported, it has not been confirmed, but events subsequent to that indicate that he, in fact, gave that speech. In that speech, he advocated the use of disease to exterminate, not just kill Americans, but to exterminate the American population. And he wanted to do that because, as you said, he wanted to have the Chinese inhabit the vast spaces of North America left uninhabited after the diseases. And what we saw with COVID-19 indicates that this was, it exhibited the same maliciousness that General Chi Haotan said in that speech. Because, COVID-19, we know maybe 99% that it was genetically modified at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But there's something that we know 100%. 100%, Kevin, we know that Xi Jinping, after this disease got into the Chinese population, he decided to spread it to the rest of the world. He did it two ways. First of all, he knew by no later than the second week of December of 2019 that this disease was highly contagious, but he told the world it was not. And then while he was strictly locking down his own country, he was pressuring other countries to take arrivals from China without travel restrictions or quarantines. You put those two things together, and it means that China deliberately spread this disease beyond China's borders. 7 million people died from this disease outside China, including 1.2 million Americans. That's the same maliciousness that General Chi Haotan exhibited in that secret speech.
Well, this is unrestricted warfare. We're going to have so much more with Gordon Chang when we come back after the break. We got to take a break, but I want to talk with you, Gordon, about Trump's trade war and what it means for us. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Gold holds its value far better than the US dollar. Let's see what happens when I go in this sweet shop and pay with gold. Can I pay with gold?
I mean, I'll take a wait, find out how much it costs.
Do you know what? Basically, do you know why I'm even using gold?
I do not.
It holds its value over time, but it's a bit difficult to spend, isn't it? Do you take this?
Yes.
That's MasterCard. Yeah, but this is I'm actually going to pay with gold, believe it or not, using this. That's my MasterCard, and it's linked to my gold wallet. So let's just watch that. Authorizing. Yeah, add a tip.
Thank you.
So this is your store?
Yes, sir.
And how much gold did I pay?
0.2243 grams.
Yeah, success. Bought with gold, paid with glint.
We're speaking with the best China expert I know, Gordon Chang. He lived and worked there. He understands the Communist Party like no one else, and he's giving us prescient warnings, but he's also giving us practical solutions of things we can do about it. And Gordon, before I start, I'd like to play a short clip from an interview I did with the late, great Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty.
They were stealing everything from intellectual property, hoodwinking us, devaluing the currency. I mean, there was nothing that this bunch won't do. They're our enemy. You say, we really messed up. The only man I've ever seen since I've been here, Ronald Reagan maybe, going way back. But you say the only individual that I've ever personally seen that stepped up and said, they're running a scam on us.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
You know, that's an interview I did, 6 years ago with Phil Robertson down at his place in West Monroe, Louisiana. But he seemed to intuitively understand and get that China is not our friend. They're our enemy. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, he is absolutely right about that. This is clear. China has declared a quote-unquote people's war on us. And that is, we say, well, it's just propaganda, but no, that phrase has great resonance in China. People's war means total war. And the reason the Chinese regime is doing this is it's with its strident anti-Americanism, it is creating the justification to kill Americans. And Phil Robertson, he was absolutely correct about this. God bless his soul. We need more Americans to hear that clip because it's really important. It just gets to the essence of China's war on us.
He also gets to the essence that the first president in my lifetime that's really paid attention. Now, Ronald Reagan didn't have to. The Chinese economy wasn't, and military wasn't in a position that we really had to deal with them. We should have, but we didn't know that we should have. But there's no other president that has approached China as at least an adversary other than Donald Trump. And now we have this trade war. What are your thoughts on the trade policies of Trump versus China?
Oh, they're absolutely necessary. And the reason is we have these large, unsustainable trade deficits with China. Last year, our merchandise trade deficit with China was $295.4 billion. That was 5.8% greater than the merchandise trade deficit in the year before. And we obviously have got to deal with it. And no president before him was able to take effective measures. These tariffs are what will save our domestic manufacturing. And I think that we are going to see, especially with the permanent reduction in tax rates in the big, beautiful bill, I think we're going to see a renaissance of American manufacturing. One thing we need, and I hope President Trump does this, is to increase our investment tax credits so that Americans can start businesses. But we're on the right path. And this is the first time in 5 decades that we have been on the right path.
Yeah, well, we've been in a trade war. The question is whether or not we were going to fight back, and President Trump seems willing to do that. So here's a July 7th post on X you made. As a practical matter, the rules-based trade order is dead. China killed it, and Trump stopped pretending it continued to exist. I think that's a great revelation that he's not the killer of the world trade order. It was China. He's just responding to it.
Yes, and when we go back to 2018, when President Trump put his first round of tariffs on China, people said, oh, President Trump was starting a trade war. As you point out, Kevin, no, China was waging a trade war against us for decades, and President Trump was the first to fight back. This is really important for us because of these trade deficits that are just bleeding us. We have all of these decimated communities around our country, fentanyl and all the rest of it, killing hope. This is China attacking our society.
Well, they're attacking in another area that you pointed out, which is rare earth minerals. They've created a false monopoly. They don't really have a monopoly on rare earth, but they've created a false monopoly by encouraging environmental policies that prevent us from accessing our own rare earth minerals. And they've used unrestricted warfare tactics to try and stop other nations from developing rare earth minerals, so everyone ends up dependent on China. How are we addressing that?
Well, we're addressing it by actually starting to mine and process. And we also see that we're working with our partners around the world to do the same thing. You know, we have a lot of rare earths in our country. We have a lot of lithium. It's just that we don't mine it, we don't process it. And by the way, in Canada, especially in Saskatchewan, there's a lot of rare earth there as well. So North America is full of this stuff. You know, they're not rare, despite the name, but it's just that we have decided as a nation some time ago not to mine it and not to process it. So let's do that. And President Trump is starting. And the other thing that we need to do is make sure we make our pharmaceuticals in America. We can't rely on the Chinese, because that's the other critical vulnerability that we have.
Yeah, no, we've worked with Rosemary Gibson on that issue. In fact, we broke her news story 6 or 7 years ago here in Economic War Room. I think that was our episode number 6, and we've been fighting on that ever since. Now, I'm concerned about one area is that China's not sitting back. I mean, they're in trouble. You pointed that out. You were the first to point out that they were in trouble. But they've been doing some nefarious things, actually undermining us with allies. Do you have any comments on what's happening in South Korea, where China is trying to gain influence and really harm one of our most critical Asian allies?
China's assault on South Korea has been all-encompassing. I think they helped the Democratic Party of Korea, which is now in power, to rig the last 4 national elections, 2020, 2022, 2024, and this year as well. And also we are seeing Chinese nationals voting in Korea. This is really, really bad, because we've now got a president in South Korea who is, pro-China, pro-North Korea. He hates us. This is a very tenuous situation for the free world.
Is there anything we ought to be doing? Do you have any words for the Trump administration or the American people? What can we do to help good influences in South Korea?
Yeah, the first thing I think we need to do is talk about how the Democratic Party of Korea, with China's help, stole the June 3rd presidential election. There's a lot of evidence about this. That means that Lee Jae-myung, the winner in that election, supposedly, I think he's illegitimate. This is going to be hard for Washington to do, but we need to have an honest conversation about the fairness of the June 3 presidential election. That's where we start. And then from there are so many other things we have to do. But that is the starting point.
Well, and we also need to admit that there was evidence that China tried to manipulate our election in 2020. That's recently come out. All right, we need to take another break. But when we come back, I'd like to talk about Xi Jinping, his future, and the future of the Chinese Communist Party.
I'm Kevin Sorbo. When you spend money, you consider who you're buying from and the causes they support. If you don't, then you're likely supporting companies that are trying to destroy our country and take away our freedoms. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a cell phone company, and a good one. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks, along with 100% US-based customer support. But here's the deal. Patriot Mobile's mission has nothing to do with cell phones. They carry out their mission by giving back millions of dollars every year to Christian conservative causes that are actively engaged in the fight to save America. Voting is no longer enough to beat the woke. We have to band together, support like-minded companies, and vote with our dollars. That's how we win. Stop supporting companies that want to destroy America and join Patriot Mobile today by visiting Patriot.
I'm outside Babe's, which I'm told is the quintessential chicken restaurant here in Roanoke, Texas. Let's go and see if we can buy the food in here, chicken with gold.
This is gonna be the fried chicken.
This is unbelievable. How am I going to fit all this in? I seriously actually don't know how to begin with this. This is so overwhelming.
They're with you.
Do you think I can pay with gold?
I don't know. know. You may have to ask the cashier. I don't handle it.
Can I pay with gold? But actually, you said I could pay with this? Okay, I'm gonna pay with this, but I'm gonna pay with gold. So look at the price of gold going up. That's pretty cool, yeah? Right, this is babes, yeah? How much gold did I pay? Gold, how many grams?
0.26.
0.26, quarter of a gram of gold. How about that?
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah. Success! Bought with gold, paid with glint.
We're talking with the great Gordon Chang. We're talking about China. We're talking about the threat to the United States. We're talking about things that President Trump can do to help protect us and things that we as individuals ought to be doing to make America great again. I've got a tweet here, July 7th, Gordon Chang. This is an ex-post, I should say. Xi Jinping skipped the BRICS summit because either he had to stay home to fight his enemies or his enemies did not allow him to leave. China is unstable and just about everything we know about the country will soon become obsolete. And that's a response to time I think you had with Maria Bartiromo. Why did he skip the BRICS summit, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's because of either of those two cases. I tend to think that he's not permitted to leave, but we don't know. You know, the Chinese political system under Xi Jinping has become even more opaque. And now that there's intense infighting, the regime has sort of closed the doors. But we're seeing signs of instability, especially in the military, where I think that it's clear that Xi Jinping has lost control of the People's Liberation Army, which is the most important faction in the Communist Party. There is less corroboration about his loss of influence among civilians, but we can see signs of that as well. Something that people haven't talked about is that the Communist Party plans to hold a general meeting called the Fourth Plenum. It's been delayed since last year. It's probably been delayed because senior leaders can't agree on important things. And that's another sign that the regime right now is in turmoil. So we add up all these signs and we can say that although we don't know the exact confines of what's going on, it's clear that this regime is in the middle of an intense fight.
Well, that seems like good news, but also really terrifying news at the same time. It's good news because the Chinese Communist Party may be falling apart, and if it handled properly, could liberate the Chinese people, who are wonderful people and wonderful contributors to free markets and everything historically. But bad news because a wounded dragon can be very dangerous. Where do you land on that?
Yeah, there is three scenarios. One of them is that Xi Jinping has lost and he's resigned to his fate. And that is a relatively tame regime. The other scenario is that Xi Jinping, you know, we could all be wrong and Xi Jinping is perfectly okay. And that is also doesn't pose an urgent problem. But what I think is most probable, I think that Xi Jinping is fighting for his political life. And that is the most dangerous scenario, not only for China, but for us. And the reason is Xi Jinping now has an incentive to go to war or to create a confrontation with others. And the reason is he doesn't want to rally the Chinese people. The Chinese people right now do not want war. But I think that he has an incentive to do that to prevent other Communist Party figures from deposing him. Because in the middle of a war, it would be very difficult for the party to change its leader. So we know that the Chinese have agents, operatives, and soldiers in the United States. This is a time where Xi Jinping has an incentive to give the go order to them to attack us. And that's why I think this is a moment of great consequence for us.
Well, the go order to attack us is frightening, especially if they have anybody that's come across the border, which, of course, we know many Chinese nationals have come across the border. So there could be attacks on the homeland. They're certainly ramping up attacks on our food supply, and they've not slowed any of their unrestricted warfare tactics the past few years. What should we be doing other than trying to be extra vigilant?
Yeah, the first thing that I think the most urgent priority of the federal government is to break up the Chinese and the Iranian networks in our country. Because, as I said, the only reason they haven't attacked is because Xi Jinping hasn't told them to do so. We know these networks are there. For instance, about a couple of weeks ago, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino actually tweeted about a network that they had broken up of Chinese operatives. But there are so many more than our country, so we've got to get those. And just in general, we need to get the Chinese off our farmland. We need to seal our borders. And our northern borders are now a problem with regard to the Chinese as well. It's not just the one with Mexico. And we need to close the Chinese banks and consulates. They've been doing so much damage to us. And each of these is a long conversation. But the point is we need to get the Chinese regime out of our country because, as former FBI Director Christopher Wray said, the Chinese are overwhelming the FBI. They're overwhelming the federal government. They're overwhelming state governments. They're overwhelming our institutions. They're overwhelming us full stop. And he was absolutely right about that.
Well, it should be a bipartisan response. Unfortunately, there's a bipartisan infiltration from China into our political class, and that's something else we have to worry about. And then we have to worry about the fact that we have been funding a lot of this activity, not only through our consumer goods purchases, but also our investments. And our mutual friend Roger Robinson has been, decrying the fact that we're sending so much money, in some cases, to completely fraudulent companies in China. Are there good ways to invest that you know of that don't go into China?
Well, the most important thing is to tell your broker you don't want to own Chinese stocks. And most people are going to say, I don't own any Chinese stocks. But if you own a mutual fund with international stocks, you almost certainly have Chinese investments. So tell your broker you want a mutual fund. If you want an international fund, tell them you want one which is ex-China, ex-Hong Kong. And that means you'll get a mutual fund which is not investing in our enemy. Roger Robinson is such a hero. All of us have gotten inspiration and all of our learning from him.
Yeah, no, fantastic. All right, and we're going to wrap up in just a second, but a number of your posts on a regular basis, you do something that warms my heart. You call for prayer. Here's one, July 7th. Love God, ask for his protection, seek his mercy, show your faith, pray. Why is that so central to what we need to do?
If we're going to survive as a country, Kevin, we've got to be moral. For us to be moral, we have to have faith, because faith is the basis of morality. We are the children of Abraham. And so we have to get back to where we were before. We have to have faith. We've got to believe.
Well, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's what we like to end on, is hope. The hope that we can have is in knowing God and sharing God's love through America. All right, what's the best way to follow your work?
As you point out on X, at GORDONGCHANG, and I archive all of my articles for free on my website, www.GORDONCHANG.com.
Well, thank you so much for being in the Economic War Room. It's been great to have you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you.
We're going to summarize all this in our free economic battle plan. You can get your copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.